Welcome back to the Ignore the Template podcast, the only FPL podcast on the entire internet, hosted by me. My name is Devin, and we have wrapped up Game Week 1. What did we learn? I learned a lot. I watched every single match, so you didn't have to. And I also wrote down all the FPL relevant stuff so that I could present it to you. So let's go through every single match, every single team, and come away with at least one key point for FPL to help us with Game Week 2 and beyond. Let's get into it. Kicking off with a match that started things off for the season this year, Arsenal 3, Coventry 0. And the first takeaway for me, talking about Arsenal, is the Arsenal attack back. And we not last season, and probably not even the season before that, but the season before that, we saw free-flowing Arsenal that were creating a lot of chances from open play. I'm thinking uninjured Saka. I'm thinking Odegaard at his best. Martinelli more or less, although we can pass on that one. But those two guys really knitted an attack together. And I know it's just Coventry, but we've seen them play against Man City in the Community Shield, and they were creating chances like no other. So I think Odegaard and their new signing Solis, left winger, they look really good and enticing. Are they more interesting than the defenders? I think that's still an open question, but my first main takeaway from Arsenal is that we may see a shift back away from a defense-first conservative approach to a more open, free-flowing attack. And for Coventry, unfortunately, we didn't get a lot from this match, which I don't think anybody was expecting. Arsenal had 1.85 XG, Coventry had 0.56. If you looked at the timing chart of the chances, Coventry basically weren't in the match until the 85th minute when they got one decent shot off, and the game was gone by then. So here are the stats on screen if you're watching this on YouTube. But if you're just listening to audio only, really the main thing for Coventry is that they need to adjust their play style in the Premier League from the Championship in order to have any viability for FPL asset ship, if that makes sense. Like, I am not going to be targeting any Coventry players to bring into my squad. Doesn't matter how cheap their 4.0 defenders are, they are not viable assets until proven otherwise. And I think while this was a very challenging test, the signs that they need to adjust their play style were very evident. Like, there just was no answer to Arsenal, unlike what we saw in another match, which we'll definitely talk about later. I take it back. We're talking about it now because, of course, I'm referring to Hull City 2, Manchester United 0 points. What an upset. Did not expect that. And the underlying data is kind of interesting in the match because if you watched it, Hull City were pretty convincing. It wasn't like it was just a fluke goal and then they sat back. No, if you look at the timing chart, Hull City put in those two very high XG chances early on in the game, obviously for their two goals. And then they kind of coasted until about the 78th minute. And then the XG kind of flipped when the game state is totally different. And Manchester United then started to create better and bigger chances for themselves. So Hull City, round of applause for you all. That fantastic performance. And that has to be the first point, which is that they are going to be much harder to break down than expected. We'll talk about Manchester United in a second because I think that leads into it. But I would have to say the main takeaway for me is that if I'm looking for a differential, newly promoted 4.0 defender that's going to play and get DEFCONs, I'm looking at Hull City before I'm looking at Coventry, even before I'm looking at Ipswich. So hats off to Hull City. I'm very interested to see how they continue in the Premier League because I think they've developed somewhat of a formula to play against some of the bigger boys. And for Manchester United, who on earth, who of all the FPL content creators, all these proposed experts could have predicted that Manchester United might have an inconsistent defense, a defense that maybe is not as reliable for clean sheets as anticipated. And yes, I'm feeling especially obnoxious because everyone who clowned on me for putting down Luke Shaw as a unreliable FPL asset, and it turned out to be true. Although I will say, to his credit, I thought he put in some pretty good crosses, some better offensive chances than we saw last season. So I think it's still more of an open question, but yeah, of course I felt a little vindicated that they lost to probably what is going to be the worst side in the Premier League this season, 2-0. And yeah, very upsetting. But I wouldn't abandon all Manchester United assets. Obviously, on paper, which, again, going back to the preseason advice, this is the point of the season where we know as little as humanly possible about the upcoming season. And paper is not as reliable, but on paper, they do have relatively easy fixtures. So I wouldn't be selling the likes of Bruno and Mbumo and Shaw and Maguire, which is probably 99% of the people watching this have at least one of those guys, probably 100%, let's be honest. But I wouldn't be selling those guys. I'm not going to sell Mbumo despite the blank. They still created a lot of chances. They probably should have scored based on their underlying data, but a really poor result against a very poor team that had a very good formula put up against them. And Carrick just didn't have the answers. Moving on to Everton Crystal Palace, which, yeah, looking at the underlying data, a little unfortunate for Crystal Palace, but let's focus on Everton because we know that Keenan Dewsbury-Hall, he still has a rocket, and what a finish that was off his left boot. A little bit of a curl on it. Fantastic. Am I regretting that I didn't go for Dewsbury-Hall and I opted for Ismail Assar, who is probably going to be halfway to Turkey at this point? Yeah, and I'm incredibly butthurt that I used, especially on a bench boost. But yeah, this isn't about my team. This is about Everton and Crystal Palace. Everton, I thought, were consistent, played fairly well, probably deserved the win despite the XG not favoring them. If we look at the, oh wow, actually that is surprising. If we're looking at the time chart, Crystal Palace were a step above Everton the whole match. They just weren't able to convert the chances. So maybe that defeats my point a little bit, but at the time of recording, Everton still have KDH and Njai who know how to put away these chances. Like if you look at this is a very low XG chance, but we saw all of last season, Dewsbury Hall was able to convert chances like this. And then this one was the Njai goal, I believe. So the bonus point for Everton is that Njai got DEFCONs, and he actually, when I looked at the data, he had more DEFCONs than KDH last season, which I was very shocked by. But both are really good assets. Both I think will continue to perform. Maybe they got a little lucky this match, but they've relied on that in previous seasons and they've, done well with it. As for Crystal Palace, conceding 2 goals off of 1.45 XG, especially when this first goal was such a low XG chance, it does have me a little concerned about the Mitchell shout. Are they going to be as defensively solid as we saw last season, which wasn't that defensively solid, but you could still rely on the likes of Lacroix and Munoz and whatnot to get the occasional clean sheet. But yeah, we are gaining new information, obviously new coach at Crystal Palace. I think a lot of their assets are going to be wait and see. And the biggest bummer is that Ismail Assar is probably not going to be in the squad moving forward, because I think he's a huge boost to them. Honestly, the reason I went for him is I saw some of those links and I just could not believe that Crystal Palace would let a player like Ismail Assar go this late into the window. If it was early on and they had the time to replace him, but now it's like, are you just going to rely on Nketiah and Yeremy Pino? Is that good enough to survive? I don't know. So I've got some big questions about Crystal Palace. Ipswich v Sunderland. Starting with Ipswich, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that Enciso looked electric. He looked so good, and it's very unfortunate he got injured. I think overall, a lot of their players who probably would have just been a complete avoid may have moved themselves into a wait and see for me. So I'm thinking Fatawu, I'm thinking Enciso, Maeda. I'm kind of interested in the Ipswich players because I thought overall they looked good against the Sunderland side. I have high expectations for. So Ipswich, you've probably moved yourself from completely avoid to some of those players are wait and see. As for Sunderland, I have to say it was kind of disappointing defensively. So when I was very high on the likes of Dan Ballard and Robin Roofs and Mukiele, despite being injured at the beginning of the season, maybe it's going to take some of those injured guys coming back to be better defensively. But I thought they would have had enough to keep Ipswich out, and they just didn't. If we look at the timing chart, Sunderland started the game fairly well, but there were periods throughout the game it was just very even, and I think the score line was fair, but Sunderland just didn't do enough. So in terms of FPL, I was very positive on like a Dan Ballard, but now maybe slightly gone down, not removed, because I still think he has goal threat. I still think he has def cons, but I really think maybe they just need a Mukiele for a little bit more defensive support before we can start locking these guys in for clean sheets. Nottingham Forest versus Leeds. Honestly, I would like to have a bunch of takeaways from this, but I think overall, just from a macro level, two very good teams kind of just evening themselves out. If you look at the XG, 0.66 to 0.47 in favor of Nottingham Forest, but Leeds got the goal. So yeah, just not a lot from a macro standpoint. From a micro standpoint, talking about Nottingham Forest, if you own Ola Aina, he might have been the biggest scammer, the biggest jammer of game week 1. For one, he probably should have gotten the red card. And on top of that, he got subbed before Anton Stack scored in the 90th minute. So he scammed that clean sheet 4-pointer as well. So consider yourself lucky, Ola Aina owners. I was kind of debating between him and Mitchell. Even though Ola Aina kind of escaped away with more points this game week, I'm kind of happy I'm going with Mitchell because I think Aina might be a little concerning going forward. And then moving on to Leeds, I think sometimes this happens. A player who's on set pieces, who has def cons in his locker, ends up getting def cons and he ends up scoring the set piece. It was a moment of brilliance that separated these two sides, and Anton Stack, great FPL pick. I have him in my team, but he's probably just going to be a long-term hold for me because he's going to pick up def cons and then the occasional set piece goal or set piece assist. So very happy with that one. Otherwise from Leeds, I don't think there's a whole lot. Trafford was fine, but didn't have to deal with a lot. So maybe that's something to monitor moving forward. And then I guess if you had like a James Justin or a Rodon, you could feel pretty good about your value from a 4.5 million defender. Brentford 3, Tottenham 0. And wow, what a convincing performance from Brentford. And I feel fully justified. I was about to say rectified. No, I didn't rectify nothing. I was justified in having Brentford 8th in my Premier League predictions. I just think they're a solid team. They're going to do well this season, and they showed that today. It was the perfect example of evolution versus revolution. And Brentford, the evolution team, 4.04 XG, 3 goals, 2-0. Tottenham had 0.76 XG. And for Brentford, the biggest takeaway, this one's going to be obvious. Sangare is a beast. Now, I'm going to pull up some specific stats on him and even a post because I think it warrants it. But there have been a lot of parallels to him and Anderson, who, if we remember back to last season, Anderson was one of the highest scoring midfielders in the entire game. And that's because he had 52 points from defensive contributions, meaning he got a DEFCON hit rate of about 68%. And I have to shout out this post by Benji Boy on the FPL subreddit, the title, Mamadou Sangare, potential FPL gem. He's going to go through exactly why he's a gem. And this is why I'm like slightly annoyed that he got those 2 assists, is because I'm not bringing in Sangare for the assist and the attacking threat. It's the DEFCON potential. Because if we're really, the summary here is if you look at his performance in Ligue 1 for Lens, he got a DEFCON hit rate of about 66%, which again is very similar to what Anderson did last season. If he can get the occasional attacking return, it's just going to be mustard for FPL. And the fact that he's a full million cheaper than him, I think is a very good sign. But really the thing that the reason I didn't bring him in game week 0 or ahead of game week 1 is because the one question is, can he translate the DEFCONs from Ligue 1 to the Premier League? Is it going to be the same? Is he going to be able to perform a similar way? Because we know it doesn't always translate. Goals, assists, DEFCONs, performance, tactics, it's all mixed in a jumble. But he was able to hit 13 in 75 minutes. So the fact that he was able to do that, it gives me at least some glimpse into the fact that he can recreate this on a regular basis. And if he can continue to hit DEFCONs in about 2 of every 3 matches, he's going to be the best value midfielder in the entire game. Okay, enough Sangare, glazing. Let's go ahead and talk about Tottenham. And I think really the main takeaway here is that they were a wait and see for me for good reason. They're just really not a team yet. And that was my worry. So guys like Kinski, who's only 4.5, and Van Hecke, they have good potential in this team, but we don't really know how they're going to play yet. We know that De Zerbi was able to do very well towards the end of the season, but in a very limited sample size. So I don't know if we can necessarily take anything as like gold, you know what I mean? And not to say that this one match is representative of how they're going to play moving forward, but it's just more of an uncertainty than some of these other guys, other defenders specifically, that we know more about and have a little bit more confidence in. So probably the moral of the story is pick your battles when you're going for these punts. I think if you came away with 14 points from Sangare, you're probably feeling very, very good. A lot of people are bringing him in. He's probably going to be risen in price by the time this comes out. I'm going to have him in my team almost certainly. So yeah, that one was good. The Tottenham punts, not so much. Moving on to the Sunday fixtures, Brighton 4, Aston Villa 0, and the XG was basically representative of that. 4 XG for Brighton. Aston Villa had 0.28. They got completely spanked. And yeah, hats off to Brighton. Let's stick with Brighton first because honestly, Aston Villa were miserable. So I don't know how many positive takeaways we can bring from them. But from a Brighton standpoint, the one thing that I would caution is to pump the brakes a little bit on Hinchelwood. Let's not group him in this set of players that are bound to get 2 goals every single match. Came off in the 69th minute. I think there are some warning signs there that he may not be nailed despite the good performance. He may not be able to replicate this kind of performance every single week when they're not playing a team as bad as Aston Villa's defense was. And if we look at his previous seasons, I wonder if I can actually just click on this. No, it's not going to let me. Let's go to Hinchelwood's stats for a second because he's not this prolific player. He's still young and he may be developing his game, but it would take a massive development and a massive boost in his underlying and observed stats for him to be, I think, a player in the conversation of, even somebody at the same price like Anton Stack. So he got 2 goals from 1.4 XG in this past game. Last season, across 27 appearances, he got 4 goals, 3 assists. The season before that, 5 goals, 2 assists. The season before that, 3 goals, 0 assists. And then, basically nothing because he was, probably like 18 at that point. But he's a young player. He's not going to be as nailed for minutes. He's not going to be a DEFCON guy. He's going to get the occasional goal. My worry is that, kind of like Reinders last season, does very well game week 1, and then tactics and the amount of players that these teams have, they kind of go under the radar for the remainder of you having them in your team. So he could be great. Just wanted to offer that one word of caution if you are thinking about bringing him in. Me personally, as an FPL player, I would wait to see how he develops a bit more, to see if he can bring more into his game, if he can have more avenues to points like DEFCONs and things like that. If he starts developing that in his game, and has a good attacking output, then the consideration is there. But I'm not tearing up my team for Jack Hinchelwood. And then really not much to say for Aston Villa. They were the worst defense, I think, this entire game week. They're completely shambolic. Maybe the worst overall team in game week 1. I would just completely avoid all their players. They've had a lot of players ripped away from them. Konsa's going to Arsenal. Tielemans went to Manchester United. Who knows if Watkins is going to stick around? Obviously, Rodgers has gone to Chelsea. This team just is not the team of last season or even previous seasons. This is a very weak squad, and I feel for Unai Emery, but I am concerned if they're not able to get the signings in. Is this going to be the team that comes back and is able to compete for Champions League places like I know Unai Emery is going to want? I'm not entirely sure. So that would be very frustrating. So we'll see. Manchester City 2, Bournemouth 1. And the main takeaway for Man City is that Erling Haaland's haircut was the only thing that was sharp, because boy, this guy looks dull and rusty. He had 2 very convertible shots. One really in particular, everybody knows the chance I'm talking about. The cross from O'Reilly, he finishes that 10 times out of 10. This was a fluke. I think, am I going to remove him from my team because of this? Absolutely not. I just think he's going to get sharper, considering he didn't really have much of a preseason. And this is really the first game week. So count on Haaland converting those chances in the future. As a O'Reilly owner, I'm a little butthurt about it, but totally understandable. From an XG perspective, 2.47 to 0.71 in favor of Man City. So despite Bournemouth going up early, and yeah, even when they went up, they had less XG than Man City had accumulated at that point. So were they ever really in the game? Arguably, yes, but I think Man City were just the better team. I expect them to continue to improve, and I would not be alarmed whatsoever about Man City assets. I've got 3 of them myself. Long-term hold for sure. Last little minor point on Man City is Phil Foden. He had that one good pass, but otherwise just did not impact the game. And we really saw, when did he get subbed? The 84th minute for Turkey? That's basically when the goals came, right? Okay. Yeah, I guess right before, or right after. Yeah, Phil Foden was not effective. And I know that Maresca has pointed him out as one of the pillars of the team, but I don't know how relevant that is to FPL. Foden would still be a wait and see for me, despite being only 7 million, despite what we know he can do. We just don't know what he can do in this Maresca side at current. And for Bournemouth, gotta admit, I think they were a little lucky to have even been in the match. Obviously, we could see that from the underlying data, but I think considering they put up a performance against a side as good as Man City, I am very curious to see how some of these Bournemouth assets perform when they don't have such difficult fixtures. So I'm looking at you, Marcus Tavernier. I'm looking at you, Ryan. I'm looking at you, Justin Kluivert, and Truffert. Maybe even James Hill. So I think Bournemouth have a lot of interesting FPL assets. Am I going to be bringing them in now? No, because I think they've got Liverpool and Arsenal, maybe City, Chelsea coming up. So yeah, until they get past game week 5, I'm probably just going to avoid, but I am going to be watching them tentatively, because I think a lot of these guys that if you have the stomach for the rough fixtures on paper, they can be very good for you, as we saw with Tavernier getting the goal. Newcastle 2, Liverpool 2, underlying data telling a slightly different story. 1.59 XG to 3.13 XG, although the PK, the penalty kick at the end, definitely inflates that. So let's talk about Newcastle, because honestly, I was not expecting a whole lot from this team, and I was very impressed. I think they had a very clear game plan going into this. They exploited Liverpool perfectly, and they are a team that know how to counter under this new coach. And I'll mention Liverpool in a second regarding that exact point, but I think we have to keep the likes of Osula and Wissa and Alonga in our thoughts, maybe not like top of the thoughts, but specifically Wissa, I thought he put in a great performance. Yeah, maybe he didn't get on the score sheet for the goal. I know he got the assist, right? But that's a player that I'm very interested in for the fact that he has the record. He put up, what was it, 20 goals, non-penalty goals 2 seasons ago at Brentford. So it's one of those which kind of like Isak in a way, you might have to kind of erase your memory of last season to consider this a good pick. But I think if Wissa starts showing this same level of performance as he did against Liverpool, at 6 million, that is a very good player, arguably better than Calvert-Lewin, who I rate very highly. Now on to Liverpool. Really the biggest takeaway, I think, is that Szoboszlai is on penalties. So that kind of clears it up. Does it necessarily mean he's 100% on penalties, or was it the factor that Isak was playing his old team and it was in the 90th minute and all the pressure? Honestly, I think it kind of does. I think it does mean that Szoboszlai is the number one penalty kick taker. And I get, we might as well talk about Isak because we're here, but he was getting booed all match for the right reasons, I think. And he just shrunk. He didn't, puff out his chest, show how good of a striker he was. And maybe that's another reason he didn't take the penalty. The confidence isn't there. The performance wasn't there. Yeah, for everyone who went for Isak instead of Haaland, yes, you can still maintain and wait to see how that goes. But my confidence in Isak being the player he was 2 seasons ago at Newcastle, post leg break as well, I need to see more before I'm feeling a little bit more confident in it. So yes, he's only what, 9.5 million, and you could save a lot. But Haaland, I think, despite the fact that they both got the same amount of points at the end of the game week, I worry that Haaland is going to be scoring a lot more than Isak this season. And maybe it's not as cut and dry as that, but yeah, okay, I'll shut up. Man, yeah, there's so much to talk about with this Liverpool squad because it's such a mess. So, of course, Cody Gakpo getting the opening goal. He may be off to Spurs, which could be a good asset for them. He could be even going to Man City. That is freaking weird. But he may not be a Liverpool player, so I would avoid that. Of course, Dominic Szoboszlai converting the penalty, that's good. But defensively, so weak. So that one point that I nearly forgot about that I mentioned up top with Newcastle, exploiting the counter. Oh boy, that was so evident. So would I be bringing in Jeremy Jacquet, who's only 5 million and performed well, or Frimpong, who's got the attacking threat, or Kirkez, who also has the attacking threat? I wouldn't be touching Liverpool defenders from an FPL standpoint with a 10-foot pole. They're so vulnerable to being countered. The amount of space in the midfield is just like gigantic. Okay, you could roll a bus through there, and yeah, I don't know what metaphor I'm going for, but it's the midfield is such a mess. They need to rethink that, how it's going to operate. Are fullbacks going to tuck inside and help with the midfield, or is somebody from the attack going to tuck in as more like a false nine, something like that? Because the midfield is a mess. And I am almost going as far to say, if you have a pacey winger or attacker that goes up against Liverpool in FPL, I would not be benching them. I would be starting them, first starting player on the team sheet, considering captain. Maybe not that far, but it's just so obvious that there's a weakness there for Liverpool defensively. And the final match of the game week, Fulham 2, Chelsea 3. We'll start with Fulham since they're the home team. And like a lot of these teams, I just was not expecting anything from them. And Fulham showed me something. They maybe weren't as organized, but they did have somewhat of a game plan to exploit Chelsea. And it was in that kind of erratic attacking method that they were able to get 2 goals from 1.42 XG. Defensively, I think Fulham have some issues. Like, I'm not going to be bringing any of their defenders anytime soon, but I just love Josh King. maybe this Gonzalo Garcia, while that wasn't really like the best chance, but he was able to convert it. Fulham, I think, are still in a void for me, but they're definitely more interesting than they were before game week 1, because I think this is a good Chelsea team with a very bad goalkeeper and a suspect defense. But they should be doing a lot more against this Fulham side. It shouldn't have even been this close, if I'm completely honest. So Fulham, giving you the credit, and for FPL, they've maybe moved in my thinking a little bit. Now for Chelsea, we have to talk about Cole Palmer, because he was one of those players that I kind of spotted out for, could he do a remontada on his form and reverse this trend where he's basically like halved his stats for the past like 2 seasons since he made his debut with Chelsea? Can he reverse that and show the form of previous seasons? And I think we're seeing early glimpses that he can. And if you didn't watch the match, he was absolutely phenomenal. Was really the spearhead of that attack. I thought João Pedro was excellent as well. I think they both traded off a goal and assist to each other. And yeah, I feel very confident in having João Pedro as a player in FPL. Most people do, if I'm honest. I think he's like 70% owned or 60 something percent owned. So I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but João Pedro is probably a lock in my team until he gets injured or something catastrophic happens, because I think that is going to be a trend. I'm going to continue to see João Pedro getting on the end of Cole Palmer opportunities. And then I should probably mention Morgan Rogers as well, although I think he was the 3rd best of the 3 attackers. He still got his goal, got into good positions, and he took a high XG chance and put it away. This was his goal, the 3rd goal. So it was a good quality chance, which is really not his game. He's known for hitting in these bangers from far, very low probability, low XG chances, but he did well to convert a good chance. So I think there's good upside to Rogers at his price point. I think that is this Morgan Rogers? I take it back, but that was a high XG chance. He got the 2nd goal. For some reason I had those flipped. Anyways, I'm not cutting this out, but basically what I mean to say is that Morgan Rogers, while I think he was probably the 3rd best of the 3 attackers overall, at his price point, he could be a bit of a snip. But Cole Palmer just has that X factor, so I don't know. I'm so torn. I'm not going to rip up my team by any means, but Cole Palmer is definitely a consideration, because if he performs like a premium at 9.5 million, we know what he can do. We know his ceiling. I think he can be remarkable, but there just needs to be a little bit more evidence. And it looked like he picked up a slight injury. If he was able to continue on and finish the game, or no, he was subbed off in the 85th minute, but needless to say, he played the majority of the game after he got that clip of the calf or whatever. So that's always the concern with Cole Palmer, are his injuries going to limit him? At this point, it's still a little bit too soon, but I've got my binoculars out. I'm watching Cole Palmer like a hawk. And the last little like macro point that I'll make about Chelsea is they just have a ton of players, and Xabi Alonso was doing so much tactically because it felt like he knew Chelsea were vulnerable defensively because of Robert Sanchez primarily, and he was making all these substitutions and tactical adjustments, and it seemed to be just enough. But man, if they get a quality goalkeeper in replace of Robert Sanchez, this Chelsea team could really go up a level. And I completely agree with Jamie Carragher's point on Chelsea. Like, they're not going to win the league with Robert Sanchez. Fully believe that. If they bring in a good goalkeeper, these defensive options I think might start to be an option. But for now, João Pedro, Cole Palmer, and Morgan Rogers, they have to take the flowers and be like the potential options in FPL. Otherwise, I'm kind of ignoring Malo Gusto and Reece James in particular, who, bro, what were you complaining about that yellow card for? You completely pulled Josh King by the freaking neck. But anyways, I'll leave that one there. Let's wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed the recap of Game Week 1. I'm going to be coming out with content every single week. Is it going to be exactly like this? No, because sometimes I'm going to take a more narrow issue and expand on it. This, I think it was important. We're very early on in FPL. We can't start making big, bold claims. It's important to kind of get a landscape. So I wanted to cover every team, at least one point to discuss, but look forward to new and more interesting content next week after Game Week 2 wraps up. And if you want to follow my team and what I'm thinking for FPL, join me on Discord. I post about it there. I also post about it on Substack. So if you don't want to join like an extra app and you just want to follow a link, check out the Substack. You should be able to find the post in and amongst all the videos and podcasts I come out with. And if you want to join the mini league, which has prizes, cash prizes for free, I explained all that in a separate podcast. Check out the mini league in the link in the description below, along with all that other stuff that's probably down there as well, let's be honest. Oh, and I did hear the comment on putting the mini league in the like along the border, and I think that's a great idea. I still need to do it, but I'm so dumb and bad at this like graphic stuff. So I'm on Canva. I'll work it out soon enough. Hopefully the mini league code will be in there so you could just kind of refer to it. But yeah, I'll wrap it there. Hope you had a good Game Week 1. See you for Game Week 2. And I'll catch you next time. Bye.